Welcome to all. We know that all of us have passed through or will pass through different stages of life. Generally, the life stages, it is divided into infancy, childhood, adolescence and adulthood. In this session, the focus is upon understanding adult education. This topic is related with the course MAAE 001, Understanding Adult Education. And this course is a part of one of the master degree program provided by School of Education, that is Master of Arts in Adult Education. And in today's session, the focus is upon to develop understanding upon the concept of adult education. As in the initial stage, I have stated that the different stages of human life, in that adulthood is one of the stage. And when we look at the term adult education, it comprised of two terms, adult and education. So for the first attempt, we are trying to understand who is an adult. When we look at the term adult, how can we define the particular term? We know that all of us have gone through the infancy, childhood, adolescence and come to the adult stage, and then we will enter at the old age. And here, can we call a person who attained a certain age as adulthood, that is 40 above, can we call them as adulthood? The question comes whether age criterion can be considered for the adulthood stage. No, because there may be variation in the age aspect where a person attains maturity. So when we think of adulthood, there occurs different kind of maturity like physical maturity, emotional maturity, then mental maturity and social maturity. So different kinds of maturity is needed for a person. Then comes another question. Can we call such a person who attained maturity as an adult? What is the level of maturity? What type of maturity each individual acquires? These all are different kinds of questions. And then, as I stated, the age criterion also we cannot take into account. We have seen that there are some children who behaves like an adult. So we call them as small adults. And we have, on the contrary, we have seen that there are some adults who behave like a child. So, child adult we call, or adult child. So, all these things shows that we cannot confine or limit the boundary of the term adult. But at any way, what is important in adult, that is maturity, is an important aspect. So in such case, the concept of adult remain inadequately defined because of the multiplicity of criteria that involve in defining the particular term adult. Here comes the importance to explain the various definitions given by various writers regarding the term adult. When we browse through the Oxford Advanced Learners Dictionary, adult is defined as a person who has grown to full size. Secondly, intellectually or emotionally mature. And thirdly, legally old enough to vote, marry, etc. So here the three aspects it is emphasizing, that is the growth, attainment of growth in full size. We know that the growth starts from the womb of the mother and it ends by attaining the adulthood stage. And coming to the second point, we can see that there is a part where the intellectual and emotional maturity is attaining. And this maturity, we know that the age, there is some age which is important to get the right to vote, to get married. And in this aspect also, when we look that there are different age criterion for right to vote in different countries and right to get married in different countries. In some countries it may be 18 years, in some countries it may be 21 years. And more than that, the gender wise also we can see the difference for the right to get married. So in such case, we can state that adulthood is not definitive because of its continuous transition throughout life. So we know that the life transition is happening continuously. Hence, we cannot confine the term adulthood to a particular criteria. We know that the growth, that we can measure it, and based on that alone, we cannot call a person as an adult. If a person doesn't attain physical maturity, emotional maturity, or legal maturity. And more than that, if a person attains the maturity but doesn't have the legal age to exercise the right to franchise, then also we cannot call that person as an adult. So when we look at the term adult, we know that the three things that is important, the growth is important, that is in the fullest sense, and then the maturity in the sense of physical, emotional, social, legal maturity. All the maturity has to be attained, and we can say that the intellectually the person should be matured. In such case, when we come to the point of adult, let's discuss about the characteristics of an adult. What are the characteristics? When we look at the characteristics, there is a particular age that is important for terming as an adult. But the age criterion alone cannot determine the boundary of adult. So certain age is needed. Then maturity, as we already discussed, that emotional, physical, and then legal maturity is needed. Thirdly, we can see an adult act rationally and responsibly. So the rational thinking happens at the adult stage. We know that in the childhood stage, the children are not able to think rationally. They will receive whatever they are transmitting or whatever knowledge they are acquiring. So the rational and responsible actions happen during the adult stage. And fourthly, we can see that exercise self-control, which is an important part. In behavioral pattern, in emotional aspect, this self-control is important. Then work for public cause. This is another important characteristics of an adult. Whether the return is in a negative way, the adult is able to get resilience upon the challenges and took challenges and work for a public cause. And then we can see the next important feature is balanced choices. That is, the choosing and picking up of a particular choice depends upon the thinking process of an adult. So a balanced choice can be made by an adult, then owns responsibility for his or her own action. If it is delimitation or if it is advantage or disadvantages, an adult will take responsibility of their own action. And the next characteristics feature that is identifies one's own strength and weaknesses. That means self-awareness. It's a kind of self-awareness where an adult knows what are the limits of his or her strength as well as what are the weaknesses. This is also important in the case of an adult. And then next one, that is acts and reacts with long-term perspective. That means the reaction is not for an imminent purpose. The adults will react in terms of long-term range. What is good for a far-sightedness will be an important feature of an adult. So when we look these characteristics of an adult, we can see that it can be classified as certain age, maturity, act rationally and responsibly, then exercise self-control, taking responsibility of one's own action, and then the identifies one's own strength and weaknesses, work for public cause, balance choices, acts and reacts with a long-term perspective. Coming to the next part, what becoming an adult. When we think of becoming an adult, what is important is that, as I have stated, the maturity is important and the characteristics of an adult is important. And regarding the adult education, there may emerge some kind of misconceptions. So misconceptions about adult education we will discuss. That is, suppose there are two types of misconceptions. One is adult literacy, second whether formal or informal education system. Let's have a detail on these two aspects. About adult literacy. When we take the country like developing countries, we know that there occurs lot of illiterate or there exist lot of illiterate people. So in such countries, we may take illiteracy as a main criterion. And for literating them who are dropped out from the school, who are out of the school, because of various reasons, we have to provide education. For them, we call this adult education as adult literacy. So this is one kind of misconception. So adult literacy is also covering an adult education, but adult education cannot be confined to adult literacy. Secondly, when we look at the misconception whether formal or informal education system, can we demarcate between like that? No, we cannot demarcate because adults, those who have formal education, they will continue their education also, and then they are getting education through non-formal ways also. So this, we cannot confine adult education to formal system of education alone or non-formal system of education alone or informal system of education alone. So here we should come out from the misconception about the term adult education. Then what is adult education? So let us have a discussion on various definitions given by famous writers regarding the term adult education. As we gone through this Morgan, Holmes and Bundy, their adult education may be thought of as the conscious effort of a mature person to learn something new. So here the emphasis is upon the mature person and he wants to learn something new. Lindemann, he stated that adult education begins where vocational education leaves off. So in these two definitions, what we can see is that, as in the first definition, they are emphasizing upon the thing that the conscious effort, it is not an unconscious, it is a willingness on the part of a mature person to continue education. So when we compare these two definitions, what is coming out? The most important elements of adult education are post-vocational education, which happens after getting the vocational aspect, and education for the deprived classes, and training in the basic skills of learning. And we know that in NEP 2020 also there is a separate section for adult education where the emphasis is upon enhancing the skilling nature of the adults. So the empowerment on enhancing the skilling should be done on the part of the adult education. The theoretical aspects they may be getting through the formal schooling, and after that what is needed, that the skills need to be developed. And in some definition, when we look at it, we can see that adult education is considered as a process. We have seen first who is an adult and how it is explained, and now adult education that as post-vocational aspect, and in this definition adult education as a process. When we think of adult education as a process, it can be a part-time process or a full-time process, and it can be sequential and organized activities. There will be a kind of systematic organization, a link between different kinds of activities. Then adult education as an activity or a program or as a process. So here when we look at the adult education as a process, what is important is that the part-time process is important as well as the full-time. The sequential, that which happens at different phases, that is important, and organized activities are also important. And adult education is an activity or a program or a process. When we think of adult education as a process, the definition of Paulo Freire is very much important, where he emphasized or focused on adult education as a cultural action for freedom. So here the emphasis is upon the cultural action for freedom. So there is a cultural context, and through this definition we can see that there is a cultural context for every activity of an adult. Coming to the other definition that was put forward by Friedman, he considers adult education as a process which is part of cultural development, primarily the establishment of a means of communication between the cultural systems of transmitters and the cultural system of the receivers. So through two things are important, that is a process which is part of cultural development and the communication between the transmitters and the receivers. Here the question comes, who are the transmitters? The transmitters may be the media, the school, the teachers. So there are different transmitters, and it is the receivers for whom we are delivering, who are receiving the information. That is the receivers. So as a process, we can see the process. And another definition, when we look at adult education, we can see that OECD, that is Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, it defines adult education as any learning activity or program deliberately designed for adults. So in this definition, what is important is all the activities and programs for adults is important, and general program is important, non-formal program, vocational and non-vocational education, and it cannot be restricted to any particular level. Not only at the lower level, and it is continuing throughout the life. And one more definition, when we look at the adult education, we can see that the General Conference of UNESCO stated adult education as an entire body of organized educational processes, whatever content, level and method, whether formal or otherwise, whether they prolong or replace initial education in schools, colleges, and universities, as well as in apprenticeship, whereby persons regarded as adults by the society to which they belong develop their abilities, enrich their knowledge, improve their attitudes or behaviors in the twofold perspective of full personal development and participation in balanced and independent social, economic, and cultural development. So, certain things are emphasizing in this UNESCO's definition, where the first emphasis is upon it is an organized educational process. Secondly, when we look at this, there are content, level, and method. That is also emphasizing. And the next important thing, that it prolong or initiate education in schools, colleges, and universities. That is formal system of education. And then we can see the persons regarded as adults because they want to develop their abilities, enrich their knowledge. So their higher level of knowledge they want, they need more information. So this is an important aspect. And then it emphasizes, this definition emphasizes the twofold perspective. What are the twofold perspectives? That is the full personal development, not half, the holistic development, where NEP 2020 is also emphasizing the holistic development is important, and there is a balanced development process. So there is a cultural context is there is a balanced development process. And coming to the next definition put forward by Kundu, we can see that adult education is a development-oriented education which can be planned and designed by others as well as the learners themselves. And in this definition, 3 elements are important, that it is organized by adults themselves, it is learner-centered, it is learner-centered, and development-oriented. So what we can see is that the adult education cannot be confined to a particular type of definition. We cannot put fences around that some elements comes under adult education. It is not adult literacy. It is a part of adult education. And we know that education of adults is important and education for adults is also important. Coming to the point of the education for adults, the definition given by Dr. Lakshmi Reddy, that adult education is part-time or full-time education for men and women of all ages, either organized by themselves or provided by schools, learning centers or other agencies which enable them to improve their general or professional knowledge, skills and abilities by either continuing their education or resuming their initial or incomplete education of previous year. So what this adult education? In a nutshell, we can say that the adult education cannot be confined to adult literacy. It cannot be confined to dropout children, adults only. So adult education, it is a process where the learners will continue the education throughout their life. So this adult education is very much important for all persons, and as we are adults, we are still continuing our education, whether it is the formal system or non-formal system or informal system. We are still in the process of adult education. Hope that all of you might have understood the concept of adult education. Thank you.